Okay, today we're going to be talking about how to track your intake process. And as a reminder, your intake process is going to be leads and qualifieds, set appointments is what I'm talking about, setting an appointment, showing for the appointment, show and hire. Okay. And just as a reminder, leads and qualified tells us how we are doing with our marketing, right? Is our marketing being effective? Are we getting leads? Are we getting a sufficient number of leads to based on the goals that we're setting? And are we getting qualified leads that actually potentially could be clients? If we don't get leads that potentially be clients, if we're getting, we're in Northern California in a criminal defense firm. If we're getting leads from West Virginia for family law, there's something screwed up with our marketing. So leads and qualifieds will tell you how your marketing is doing, how your branding is doing. It'll give you some insight and you can follow the trends. Sets, how many of the qualified people are setting appointments, right? Our process, and I know that different firms do it a little bit differently, but our process is to try to get them into the office. We find that the conversion rate goes way up when they come into the office as opposed to doing it over the phone. But that's because we're asking for them to cut us a check, and usually it's a pretty sizable check. If you're a personal injury firm, if they're qualified, you may set, show, and get them to hire right then and there because they're not putting any money for it. You still want to track these numbers. It just is going to be, they all may be done all at one time. It's possible these do not that this could be done at one time. They don't necessarily have to be separate events. For us as a criminal defense firm, especially doing, higher end felonies, more serious cases, we tend to have these be separate things. So we set an appointment, we get them to show up, and then we see if we will accept the case and whether they want to hire us. And that at least has been our process over the last few years. Is the first consideration is, will we accept the case? Is it a case that we want to deal with in a jurisdiction, that we're going to be comfortable going to and feel that it can be cost effective? Is it a client that we want to work with? And, is it a case that we can actually be profitable because, we're in business, right? And we need to make a profit. We can decide to do pro bono stuff. We have a special application for doing pro bono work. But I want that to be a decision, not, foisted upon me because I accepted a case that I shouldn't have accepted. So qualified leads are going to tell you how your marketing is doing. Set's going to tell you how your initial phone person is doing. Are they setting the appropriate number of appointments? Shows how many people, the appointments, like I said, actually showed up. All right. And then what's your conversion rate? All right. So how do you do this? Well, if you're small, and particularly, if you're a solo or you're, a small firm and you're just getting started, I recommend that you start with just an Excel spreadsheet. Okay. You just need columns, right? Lead, qualified, set, show, hire, and their name, right? They call. So they were a lead. Were they qualified? Yes or no. If they weren't qualified, then that's the end of it, right? Number two, calls. It's a lead. So whoever is sitting at your desk taking in these calls, if somebody calls and it's a client, it's not a lead, right? So they need to distinguish between, is this a lead or is this just an existing client? Or maybe it's a marketing call, or maybe it's, some advertising, or, it's a friend calling you to decide, figure out whether you want to go to lunch. Is it a lead? They got to decide. Is it a lead? Are they qualified? Yes. Did they get set for an appointment? Yes. Later on, did they show up for the appointment? Yes or no? And did they hire? That's the big question. That's what your spreadsheet will look like. It's simple. I encourage people to start with a spreadsheet because you need to understand what this looks like. You need to understand this process, okay? And then the second thing is this becomes your sort of duplicate. This becomes your checks and balances because we use both a spreadsheet and software. After you get comfortable with the spreadsheet, after you've got that working, and what that means is that you catch every lead every time. Every lead every time. I don't care whether it comes in by phone, text, email, smoke signal, carrier pigeon. Every lead comes in and gets, checked off. That's how you make sure that it gets done. And you need to, I think there's a real benefit, especially when you're small, just starting with a spreadsheet. Doesn't cost you anything. It's just a regular old spreadsheet, but it's super easy to track. Okay. What's the key to this? Somebody has to be responsible. Somebody has to be responsible to do this each and every day. And when I say each and every day, I mean each and every day. I get a report every single day of the leads, qualified, sets, shows, and hires every single day. And then there's a spreadsheet that shows the gross number over the year so I can see the trends. All right. Somebody needs to be responsible for that. It has to be not just left up to grabs. Somebody has to be designated. This is your responsibility. This takes time. It doesn't take a tremendous amount of time once you get good at it. While you're sitting there on the phone, you can be checking off the boxes, but it does take some time. Now, eventually, you'll want to do software, right? Now, whether you do software independent of your spreadsheet or whether you continue to do your spreadsheet, we continue to do our spreadsheet. Now, to give some perspective, we did about 100 to 120 leads a month. So, what's that, 25 to 30 calls a week. All right, so that comes down to, 5 or 6 calls a day. And then plus all the, the other calls that come in business and appointments and, and existing clients. And then there's outbound calls. So if you're tracking this, if you're doing 100 calls a week, 100 to 120 calls a week, maybe 150 calls a week, leads, plus all the other stuff, that is a full-time gig for a phone person. And you can have them track this, and you need to have a setup of who is responsible. At some point, you may get software like Lawmatics, or there's built-ins with MyCase. I'm not sure about Practice Panther, Clio, but most of these sites have kind of built-ins that you can track all of this stuff. Once you start doing that, using your software, it does make life a lot easier, but you really do want to double check it. I mean, you want to know that you're catching all your leads all the time, because in order for this to be valuable, you need to catch all your leads all the time. And at the end of the day, somebody needs to be responsible, right? Who is the person that's responsible? If you don't get your report, who do you call? And, somebody's on vacation. Who is going to take over that position? Somebody gets sick, whatever. You got to have somebody that's responsible, and ultimately you as the business owner need to be responsible to at least look at the reports. Understand what's going on. Understand what's going on in your business. If you don't know what's going on with your business, how are you gonna run it, right? So, how to track the intake process. I recommend you start with a spreadsheet, and just check off, name came in, lead, was it a lead, was it qualified, did it set, show, or hire? Keep track of that. There's a million ways you can do that system, and we can certainly help you develop a system that works for you. But the bottom line is you do that, and then once you understand how that works and you feel comfortable with it, then you can go on to software, because that does add another level, and sometimes that level is more complicated than just doing a spreadsheet. We used a spreadsheet for several years before we got into software because we weren't doing that many. Now, if you're doing, hundreds and hundreds of leads a month, it might be a little bit different. So you might have a struggle with a spreadsheet. You might need to use software. But the bottom line is somebody has to be responsible for that. Ultimately, you as the owner are responsible, but you need to assign that so that you get a report. You should not be doing that. And whoever's answering the phone, I don't care who's answering the phone, they need to understand how to do this system so that it gets properly recorded. All right, everybody. Thanks.